Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the daily practice with me, Benita. This is the second to last final part of the series on the 8 limbs of yoga as described by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So, this is part 8 out of 9. Once again, this is a perfectly fine standalone episode if you feel like diving straight into Dhyana or meditation. If you want a more complete picture of the whole yoga philosophy as outlined by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, feel free to go back and listen to the previous 7 parts, and starting from an outline of each of the limbs, and then each consecutive episode outlines or explains more in detail each one. So starting from yamas, niyamas, which are the observances towards self and others, asana, which is what we often think about when we think about yoga, which is the postures, pranayama, which is breath retention, breath expansion, or life force expansion or extension, then pratyahara, which is turning the senses inwards, dharana from last week, which is bringing focus to a single point, and now we are in dhyana or deep meditation. So once again, one more thing before we begin. I really thank you for being in this space with me and joining in and listening. If this kind of information and conversation brings you joy, value, benefit, please do consider subscribing, sharing this podcast with a friend or a family member who might also enjoy or benefit. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube or any other platform where comments are available, please do drop a comment. Maybe tell me where you're listening from. And also maybe if there's any other topics that you'd like to, hear about. In the realm of yoga, meditation, spirituality, health, wellness, and really anything adjacent. So, without further ado, let's start. So, what does Patanjali actually say in the Yoga Sutra? Yoga Sutra 3.2 says, Tatra pratyayikatanata dhyanam. Again, excuse my Sanskrit pronunciation. I haven't brushed up on it that much. When the flow of attention is continuous toward that object, it is meditation. So, like we talked about last week, Dharana is focus with effort, is a single pointed focus where there is a concerted effort and an intention, and really there's a kind of trying or attempting, or it's like a doing. But then when we get to dhyana, meditation, focus becomes effortless, like a stream. So I guess in modern phrasing or modern wording, we talk a lot about the flow state. So dhyana is really like a flow state. Meditation, it's like in Taoism, we talk about the concept of wu wei, which is doing without doing. Like there is kind of like an action happening, so there is a presence and a doer, but when we get to the point of dhyana, of meditation, focus on that object of meditation becomes effortless, and it's just It just is. It's not like a strenuous action. Okay. And in these episodes, I've always liked to have a little reflection on how this contrasts with Christianity, which is still the dominant, I guess, belief system or religion of much of the West. So Christian contemplative prayer, like the centering prayer or the cloud of unknowing, also emphasizing resting in divine presence beyond words. Christianity emphasizes a relationship with God or the divine, whereas yoga emphasizes dissolving mental fluctuations to glimpse pure awareness. But once again, to me, these are not necessarily contradictory or antagonistic practices or belief systems that, like, through meditating on the divine, on godliness, and really achieving those deep states of meditation is when we can hear God. So some people like to refer to prayer as talking to God, and meditation is like listening to God, listening to the divine and becoming still in knowing that there is this creator consciousness that is always with us and is there for us. So what are some of the real world examples of dhyana? Is it possible that you already have achieved a state of dhyana or deep meditation in your life? So obviously in the yogic tradition and in other contemplative traditions like Buddhism, there is formal meditation, formal seated meditation or walking meditation or different ways. And often this dhyana would be achieved by first getting the focus, dharana, on a single point, whether there's a breath, a mantra, a visualization. And then when we achieve dhyana, it is where that focus becomes effortless and it just kind of naturally occurs, and it's there's no longer a strain or an effort in that focus. That's when dhyana happens. So we could also, like I mentioned just a few moments ago, see that this flow state can also happen when we're practicing art, painting, playing an instrument, doing music, surfing, whatever it is where you're like actually so in the thick of it that you lose completely track of anything else. That there is just complete full presence in that moment. And there's a lot of I guess scientific research looking into what this flow state actually is, and a lot of people are really trying ways to find it or achieve it. But it is often that point where it's hard enough but not too hard. So it has to be right on that border of like what you've already achieved and what you already mastered, and then pushing a little bit further, and then all of a sudden that becomes the new flow state or dhyana. So what's kind of important to emphasize here is that dhyana or meditation is not escaping from anything. It's not like some kind of alienating pursuit of self-centeredness. It is really becoming so present that the self or the ego structure recedes, so that we're no longer really aware of where the self begins and the world ends, and like there's this loss of boundaries of self and other. And sometimes when I've sat in meditation and I've actually achieved this dhyana state, at first it can be quite uncomfortable. It's like, oh, there's no more time. And then when you kind of realize that you're in it, it often snaps you out of it. So because in the state of flow or dhyana, or like I mentioned in a previous episode, dhyana is the same word as Zen in Japanese Zen Buddhism. And really, there's no way to be in it and aware of it, or in some profound way. Of course, we are aware, because then as soon as you start thinking about being in it, you're no longer in it in kind of a strange way. So why are we talking about this in the first place? Why is it meaningful, or why does it matter to practice or try to achieve dhyana? Well, obviously, meditation has numerous benefits: reducing stress, building resilience, enhancing creativity. And obviously, there's so much research into this flow state that there's a lot of neuroscience to back it up, that it shows that meditation actually changes gray matter density, strengthens the prefrontal cortex, and lowers amygdala reactivity. So there are so many benefits of becoming more connected in this way of through focus, through concerted effort, achieving this state of, well, it's on the way to union, on the way to samadhi, of actually yoking with the highest self. But really, these like glimpses of flow state, of effortless focus, are so wonderfully healing for our brain and nervous system and our stress responses, that it's truly something that we all would really benefit from practicing. And like I mentioned, obviously, it, spiritually speaking, in the yogic philosophy, we see this as the gateway to samadhi. And even though the limbs of yoga are all mutually supportive, and they're not necessarily steps on a path or steps on a ladder that need to be taken individually, and each one can be achieved or practiced on its own in some ways, it does obviously remarkably make it easier if you've been practicing all the other steps in whatever ways, small or big ways. And then we achieve dhyana, and through dhyana there's a gateway open to samadhi that we'll talk about more in detail next week. So how can we practice dhyana? So of course, like starting with a meditation object first. Do 2 minutes, 3 minutes of looking at a burning candle. And then when it kind of like you're no longer focusing on the thing, you will naturally flow into dhyana. And the same thing can be done with a mantra or breath. And for me, sometimes these states are much easier to achieve either after yoga asana practice, but for me also like a beautiful time to practice dhyana, and where that state has seemed to be more accessible is, for instance, after surfing, when I've already exerted my body, been in touch with the elements, released anything that I don't need into the ocean, and then afterwards I'm sitting on the beach, just breathing, focusing on my breath, lengthening the breath, doing a small pranayama practice, and then focusing on the bodily sensations, focusing on the third eye, and all of a sudden there's this sense of timelessness, and I'm actually I'm becoming kind of one with the breath, and it's just, it doesn't, I don't even have to try to focus. Instead, it's just happening, and I'm noticing the breath. I'm noticing this sense of, and I guess one could say that this is almost a samadhi experience, where really the self is absorbed into a greater expansive consciousness. So just focusing on a thing and then allowing that focus to flow. It's hard to explain, and it really comes through practice, but I encourage each and every one of you to maybe look back at your life and look back at your experiences and see, where have I experienced flow? Can I remember any moment where time didn't exist, where the self didn't exist, and instead there was just like a perfect, effortless focus on the present moment? So once again, Dhyana is the same as Zen in Zen Buddhism, where meditation has become the center or even the sole focus of the practice. But Dhyana really is a word that signifies meditation. It's natural absorption into the thing that's being focused on. There's one wise man by the name of Jeremy Taylor who says, meditation is the tongue of the soul and the language of our spirit. And I think that's a good place to end. Thanks so much for joining in this short exploration into Dhyana, or meditation, as a part of the 8 limbs of yoga. And this has been a great journey for me too, to kind of revisit and explore all the beautiful parts of yoga that often get overlooked if we just go to classes somewhere. So thank you all so much for joining me again on this journey to the roots of yoga through exploring the 8 limbs of yoga as described by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras. And I was about to say previously, my battery for my microphone died, so my audio got cut off. So I'm just recording this part separately, that I've really enjoyed revisiting all the limbs of yoga in these brief explorations through this podcast. And they serve as great reminders that we can actually practice yoga all the time, not just on the mat, not just in a class. Instead, it's really a practice that can kind of permeate all aspects of our lives, and it's really beautiful that way. If you have enjoyed this series or this content in general, please do subscribe, share, like on whatever platform you're connecting through, and especially on Apple Podcasts, please do leave a review. That will help me massively to get this content heard by more people, if it's of service, as I wish it is. And frankly, I'm gonna be recording next week's episode on Samadhi, and then I believe I'm gonna be focusing a little bit more on just the practice videos on YouTube. So now my posting schedule has been 10 a.m. Mondays for this podcast, longer form, deeper exploration into different concepts or theories, thoughts, and such. And Fridays, 7 a.m. On YouTube for the practice videos. And I'm going to wrap up this 8 Limbs of Yoga series as planned. So expect next week episode on schedule. But then there will be more focus on the Friday videos. Perhaps I'm going to make them a slightly longer and have a little bit more energy, resources, and focus on the practice videos. Also, I'm exploring the idea of starting to put out 2 practice videos each week, or perhaps doing a live practice on YouTube 1 day a week, perhaps on Mondays. So that will still be confirmed in the next weeks. But yeah, thanks again so much for tuning in, and this has been a joy to explore the path of yoga with you. And remember, a good practice is the one you do.